You ever noticed how it feels like two incomes should solve everything, and yet somehow it doesn't? I want you to picture something. Two people, both working, both exhausted. The calendar's full, the fridge is half empty, the mortgage is high, the daycare bill hits like a second rent payment. There's money coming in every month, more than their parents ever made, and yet at the end of it, there's this quiet, lingering anxiety. How are we still this stressed? That feeling isn't rare. It's not a personal failure, and it's not because you're bad with money. It's something deeper. It's what the two-income trap explored years ago, the idea that two incomes, which should feel like security, often create a new kind of fragility, and most couples don't even realize it's happening to them. Hi, my name's Ted. Most people know me as Wall Street Ted. Not because I came from money or had some insider advantage, but because I've spent years studying how money really behaves inside ordinary households. And one pattern I kept seeing over and over again was this strange contradiction: couples earning more than ever, with two solid incomes, still feeling financially fragile, still stressed, still one setback away from panic. We've been taught something simple: more income equals more safety. It sounds logical. If one salary covers the basics, two salaries should mean freedom, extra savings, vacations, breathing room. But that's not what usually happens. Instead, two incomes become one lifestyle, and that lifestyle expands until both incomes are required just to maintain it. That's the trap. It doesn't happen overnight. No one sits down and says, "Let's build a life that requires both of us to work forever." It unfolds slowly. You qualify for a bigger mortgage because the bank looks at both salaries. You move to the better school district because you can afford it now. You buy the safer car. You upgrade the insurance. You enroll the kids in activities. You outsource time because there is no time. Individually, none of those decisions are irrational. They're responsible, even loving. But collectively, they create a structure where losing one income isn't inconvenient, it's catastrophic. Here's the part most people misunderstand. The issue isn't that two people are working. The issue is fixed obligations rising to consume both paychecks. There's a psychological shift that happens when households move from one income to two. The second income doesn't feel like a bonus for long. It starts to feel normal, expected, necessary. Behavioral economics calls this lifestyle anchoring. Once you adjust upward, it's incredibly painful to adjust downward. You don't feel rich making $150,000 if your fixed expenses are $140,000. You feel trapped. And here's the math nobody talks about. When one income supports a household, the second income can be optional. It can build savings, investments, optionality. But when a household restructures itself around two incomes, that margin disappears. Now both people must work not to get ahead, but to stay afloat. That changes everything psychologically, because it removes choice. Choice is more valuable than money. Let me explain. Imagine one partner hates their job. Not dramatically, just a slow burn of stress, commute, office politics, the feeling of missing dinner again. If the household only survives with two incomes, that person can't step back, not without selling the house or pulling the kids out of school or reshaping their entire life. So they stay, not because they want to, because they have to. That subtle loss of flexibility compounds over years. It shows up as resentment, as exhaustion, as low-level anxiety that never quite shuts off. And what's ironic is that the original goal was safety, but the structure creates vulnerability. If one person gets laid off, both incomes don't soften the blow because the entire cost structure depends on both. Now you're not losing extra income, you're losing survival income. That's a very different emotional experience. There's another layer to this that doesn't get enough attention: competition. When two incomes become the norm in a neighborhood, housing prices adjust upward. Think about it. If most families in an area have two earners, sellers price homes accordingly, schools become competitive, childcare prices reflect demand, even expectations shift socially. Now a single-income household isn't just choosing simplicity, they're competing against dual-income households for the same assets. This drives structural inflation in the very things families value most: housing, education, stability. It's not that families are irresponsible, it's that the system recalibrates around dual incomes, and once that happens, opting out feels like falling behind. You feel like you're choosing less for your kids. That's powerful and emotional. But I want to pause here. This isn't about telling anyone that two incomes are wrong. For many couples, both people genuinely want to work. They enjoy it. They find identity in it. They've built careers they care about. The problem isn't two incomes. The problem is building a life where you have no margin, where your entire cost of living assumes perfect stability. Because life is not perfectly stable. Someone gets sick, a company downsizes, a parent needs help, a child struggles, burnout hits. When both incomes are mandatory, those normal life events become financial emergencies, and that constant pressure shapes behavior. You might stay in a job you dislike because you can't risk a pay cut. You might delay starting something meaningful because it doesn't pay enough immediately. You might avoid having another child because the math feels impossible. Over time, money stops being a tool, it becomes a constraint. Here's the turning point most people don't see. The real goal isn't maximizing household income, it's maximizing flexibility. Those are not the same thing. You can earn a lot and have zero flexibility, or you can earn slightly less and have enormous breathing room. Flexibility means one partner could step back temporarily without the entire system collapsing. Flexibility means moving cities without panic. Flexibility means layoffs are stressful but not devastating. And flexibility often comes from controlling fixed costs more than increasing income. That's the uncomfortable truth, because cutting fixed costs doesn't feel glamorous. It doesn't show up on Instagram. It doesn't impress anyone at family gatherings, but it creates resilience. Think about housing. Housing is usually the largest fixed expense. When couples qualify for a mortgage based on two incomes, they often buy at the upper end of that approval range. The bank says you can afford this, but what the bank really means is you can afford this as long as nothing goes wrong. That's a fragile assumption. If instead a couple buys a home that one income could mostly support, even if it's tighter, even if it's less impressive, the second income becomes strategic. It can build an emergency fund, it can be invested, it can reduce future stress. That changes the emotional tone of money entirely. Now the second income feels empowering, not obligatory. Let's talk about daycare, because this one hits hard. For many families, childcare costs rival a mortgage payment, so both parents work, partly to afford childcare, which allows both parents to work. It can feel circular. And again, there's no universal answer here. For some families, dual careers are non-negotiable for identity and fulfillment. But the question worth asking isn't, does this maximize income? It's, does this maximize our well-being over the next decade? Sometimes the numbers look fine on paper, but the stress load is enormous. The constant scheduling, the time scarcity, the feeling that life is a relay race from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Money is part of the equation. Energy is too. So is presence, and those don't show up in a spreadsheet. Psychologically, humans adapt quickly to higher income. That's hedonic adaptation. You feel the bump for a few months, then it becomes normal. But we adapt much slower to reduced stress, which means chasing higher income through two full-time careers may not deliver the peace people expect. The nervous system doesn't calm down just because the salary doubled. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite. More income can mean more commitments, more expectations, more fear of losing it. Security doesn't come from the size of the paycheck alone. It comes from how much of that paycheck you truly control. So, what does this mean in real life? It means rethinking the definition of affordable. Affordable isn't what you qualify for. Affordable is what leaves room. Room for one of you to pivot. Room for savings to compound quietly over time, room for mistakes. Compound interest is powerful, yes, but compound stability might be even more powerful. When your monthly expenses are low relative to income, every dollar saved accelerates optionality. Optionality reduces anxiety. Reduced anxiety improves decisions, and good decisions compound. It's a softer kind of wealth. I've seen couples making solid six figures who feel one emergency away from chaos, and I've seen couples making far less who sleep better at night because their fixed costs are modest. The difference isn't intelligence, it's structure. The two-income trap isn't about ambition, it's about designing a life that assumes everything will always go according to plan, because it won't. And that's not pessimism, that's realism. If you're watching this and thinking, well, we already structured our life around two incomes, now what? First, breathe. This isn't about dramatic change, it's about gradually increasing margin. That might mean directing raises toward debt reduction instead of lifestyle upgrades. It might mean resisting the urge to level up neighborhoods when income rises. It might mean building a 6-month emergency fund that quietly sits there as psychological armor, not because you expect disaster, but because flexibility is calming, and calm people make better long-term financial choices. Over time, maybe one income shifts to part-time, maybe one career becomes more flexible, maybe you build enough investments that work becomes more optional. It doesn't have to happen overnight. This isn't hustle culture, it's structural adjustment. The deeper realization is this: money is deeply emotional. For many couples, two incomes symbolize progress, equality, modern success, breaking generational ceilings. And there's pride in that, rightfully so. But pride shouldn't come at the cost of constant strain. The goal isn't to prove something to the world. It's to create a life that feels steady from the inside. You don't need to win the housing competition. You don't need the largest mortgage you can handle. You don't need every external marker of success. You need resilience. You need options. You need space to exhale. If there's one idea I want you to sit with, it's this: design your life so that income creates freedom, not dependency. That might mean living slightly below what peers expect. It might mean tolerating a smaller home or older car. It might mean uncomfortable conversations about priorities. But those trade-offs buy something powerful. They buy choice, and choice reduces fear. When you know that one income could carry most of the weight if necessary, work feels different. You negotiate differently. You take smarter risks. You show up calmer. You're not clinging. You're choosing. Two incomes can absolutely build wealth, only if the second income builds assets, not just obligations. That's the quiet distinction. One builds fragility. The other builds strength. And the beautiful part is, this isn't about perfection, it's about awareness. Once you see the trap, you can slowly step out of it, not dramatically, not recklessly, just intentionally. So if you've been feeling confused about why more money hasn't brought more peace, you're not crazy. You're likely just operating inside a system that expanded to match your income. That's human, that's normal, but it's also adjustable. And you don't have to fix it all this year. You just have to start designing for margin. Because in the long run, the wealth that matters most isn't the number on a paycheck, it's the ability to say calmly, "We're okay," and mean it.